Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Carx Drift Racing 2 with Broadhammer Auto House. Today's episode is all going to be focused on how to tune your car, how certain tunes affect your vehicle and how they drive, and maybe just some suggestions as far as how you should set your vehicle up for the way that you drift. So stick along with us here and we'll jump right into the tuning details. I kind of walk through everything, and as always, if you guys have any questions, leave a comment below. Otherwise, we'll see what you guys think. All right, guys, so we're going to jump right into it here, and I'll start kind of breaking down each individual thing and kind of what they do, how they affect how everything works on your car, and what adjustments to make accordingly. So we're going to start off right away with the spring size. Obviously, this is your ride height. It's going to be how tall your car sits or how low. You can see if you adjust it there, monster truck height or not, it goes up and down. So it's pretty generic, just the height that you want your car to ride at. In addition to that, there's spring stiffness. Now, this is hard because front to back it'll change quite a bit, but um, it's how stiff your spring is in response to movements and hitting bumps and that kind of stuff. The stiffer that your stiffness is, the more stability you get, and the stiffer you do it in the front, you'll get a little bit more rear grip. So if you have stiff stuff up front in the springs, you want it to be looser in the rear so that your front kind of pushes up and puts that pressure on the rear wheels, which gives it more stability as well. So if you stiffen the rear, you get more stability out of it, but a little bit less grip. So if you're trying to get high horsepower, high moving stuff, you might want to just have a mediocre strength spring up front and pretty low in the back. Coming to the sway bar, I almost always have my sway bar in the front locked all the way out. The sway bar just reduces kind of the body roll when you're transitioning left to right. You'll see it in certain cars, the body will really roll and it causes some weird stuff to happen with the suspension and how the car reacts. So you want to have really stiff in the front. Again, this adds to the grip in the rear. And then the rear should be a more loose setup on the sway bar so that it can kind of move along with the road and get as much grip as possible. The wheel toe. So toe is if you're looking down at the top of the car, it'd be if the front wheels were kind of aiming towards each other a little bit almost. And this is going to have to do with your handling and side changing. So if you have higher toe in, and by that I mean a positive number is considered toe in. So 0.10 is 10 degrees or 0.10 degrees toe in. And that is going to be if you have more toe in, you're going to have a narrower drift line. Whereas toe out, you'll get a wider drift line. And typically you would only do toe out on the rear, not the front. But generally speaking, I just like to keep my toe pretty close to zero, but just a little bit of negative toe in the front, toe in. It's positive number, but it's toe in. So anyways, wheel camber is how tilted your front wheel is. You can see when I adjust it here if it's really tilted in like a stance or not. This one has a lot to do with your speed and drifting as well. The higher that the negative number is, the more grip at large drift angles. So if this were at -10, if I'm going super high speed, big wide drift angles, that might work for me because I want less grip up front for that. And then the opposite is true if you have like a -1 or even a 0 front wheel camber. It'll drag your car around the track and it won't really be drifting well. So you just kind of have to find a good middle ground for camber in the front. I've got mine at -5 degrees on this. And then in the rear, I run about -1 camber because I want a lot of grip back there, but 0 just seems to be too much. Caster is going to be how your wheel is tilted in full angle. So with the higher value of caster, you're going to have a quicker steering response. But if you go too high, you'll lose that front grip. So if you know your car really well and you need to have less front grip or anything like that, you could up that caster level and you would have more play in letting it kind of drift around the corners. And like I said, if you have it at a higher angle on the caster, it's going to be a quicker steering response, but that can come with some negatives as well. When it comes to Ackermann Angle, I play a lot with the Ackermann Angle on my vehicles. The higher the value of the Ackermann Angle is going to give you faster, larger angle drifts on a wider line. So if you're running like a big bank track, you want your Ackermann to be pretty high because you want to run that big wide line. If you reduce the Ackermann down like below 50%, 40, 30%, that's another one where you'll have so much contact patch on the ground that you'll basically be just dragging your car around the track, and it's just not a great way to drift. It's hard to get wide lines. Everything gets really narrow and you kind of cut in all the corners. So Ackermann can vary though, depending on the vehicle. Mine are typically between 60 and 80%, something like that, 85% on some of them when they get high enough in power and everything. So the wheel divergence angle, 60 degrees on this car, that's just your steering angle. The higher the angle, the better. I would definitely max that one out every time. You want more steering angle. It's what drifting is known for, is the steering angle. So that's an important one there. And then the bump stuff. So bump is kind of a tough one, and it's a hard one to understand for a lot of beginners. But the slow bump is kind of like your suspension and how it's reacting to hitting bumps on the road or anything like that. So the higher value of the slow bump, you're going to be more stable and kind of get some stability out of that. But if you go too high with the slow bump, it'll actually slow down the movement of your suspension. So if you hit a bump, it might be too stiff, or it won't, respond how it should. So, having a high number is good. Too high, you'll notice it in the driving ability. Fast bump is very similar. The higher the value, the more stable the car is. But if you go too high with the fast bump, you'll actually lose traction over, like it says here when you hit the little I. High values reduce pitching and rolling and sharp side changing, but they can make the car lose traction on the road sooner. So again, it's another one of those where you kind of want to be somewhere in the middle ground of those two. And then we get down to slow rebound here, where the higher the value of this will help maintain the weight on your loaded suspension when you're in a corner and drift. And it does equal a lot more stable if it's a nice high value. Too high, your suspension, again, it kind of slows down the movement of everything. It's too stiff, too much. So you kind of want to find a middle ground with that as well. And you want the suspension to be loaded up and gripped in for the corner. That's how you're going to get the fastest speeds. For fast rebound, the higher the value, the more stable as well. But again, if you go too high, you're going to lose traction because it's so stiff. So there's a lot to be said there, a lot of playing around. You can see what my rear settings are here as well. They're a little less bump and stuff. -1 camber, 10 degrees of toe and all that. So like I said, almost no sway bar in the rear. It's pretty basic. So with the wheel stuff, tuning wise, I have 19 265s with a 30% profile on the front, and same thing in the rear. Now, the biggest game changer in this will be your profile. If you update the profile to 35 or 40, you're going to get really good acceleration, really good traction, but it can really affect how everything works during drift. There's going to be a lot more side bites. You need to be on throttle hard in order to maintain a drift. They grip up a lot more and it'll straighten out if you have too much sidewall. So 30% is good. Some cars, if they have a lot of power, I'll put 35 to 40%. And that's one too where you can adjust it if you're losing people off on like the drag race out the front for a top 32 battle and he's going way faster than you. You probably need a larger sidewall tire to get there, but that additionally you have to have more power for that as well. We'll kind of skip over the engine stuff. I usually just max them out for the most part. The differential is obviously pretty standard as far as everything automotive goes. If this differential is all the way at a 1.0, that's a welded diff. Both wheels are spinning at the exact same rate the entire time around the track, and that can be great for grip and all, but not for necessarily drifting. I usually have mine somewhere around 0.5 to 0.75 depending on the car. It just makes a difference in how they sit in drift, and if you have it all the way locked out to a 1.0, it'll cause excessive straightening and a bunch of other stuff that you don't want to deal with. So don't go that stiff, but keep it up there. Gear shifting delay is how quickly you shift between gears. I still haven't figured out what the reverse gear is. I tried to Google it. I can't come up with any answers for you on that. So braking momentum wise, it's going to affect how hard the brake pads clamp on your brake rotor. So a higher value there will make you actually stop faster. but sometimes you don't want it too stiff, because if you like to do foot braking while you're drifting, you want kind of a soft brake, not aggressively stiff. Axis width is pretty self-explanatory, and then mass and center of mass height. Center of mass height you want lowest, same with mass typically. So anyways, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.